All right, well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight for the Future Peds Res IM DO webinar. We're so excited to have all of you join us for this 2022 match cycle. So my name is Tyler Brunsma. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm a fourth-year student at Penn State College of Medicine in the sweetest place on earth, Hershey, Pennsylvania. And I serve as one of the co-directors of Future Peds Res this year.
And good evening, my name is Adobe Okocha. My pronouns are she, her. I am a fourth year student at Meharry Medical College in Music City, Nashville, Tennessee. And I serve as the other co-director for Future Peds Res this year. Starting out, we would love to highlight our founders here at Future Peds Res who are now budding first year pediatric interns, Mekala Neelankatan and Nick Heitkamp. We would also love to acknowledge Dr. John Frona, Vice Chair of Education and APPD Recruitment Action Team member, and Ms. Colleen Hughes, Associate Executive Director, respectively, with the APPD, who have helped make these webinars a reality. We are so excited to have you here with us and hope that the information provided today will leave you with some gems to hold on to. It is now our pleasure to introduce you all to our Equity Manager of DO applicants, Erica Noel Barron. Erica is a fourth-year osteopathic medical student at Touro University in Nevada. Her pronouns are she, her. She was born and raised in Los Angeles, California, and is the first in her family to graduate from college and pursue a career in medicine. Erica's love for pediatrics stems from helping care for her 10 younger cousins, as well as working as a youth dance instructor at her local studio. She is passionate about pediatric injury prevention and health promotion at the grassroots level, particularly in underserved communities. Through her experiences working with children before medical school and during her clerkship, she loves to channel her inner kid at heart. And this includes bridging the gap between work and fun with patients and their families. Erica is an avid Disney Marvel fan, loves to cook and bake, and is always looking for her next cup of coffee. She has loved working on Future Peds Res Equity team and is excited for the Peds Match 22 season. Welcome, Erica.
Thanks, Adobe, and thanks, Tyler, for that wonderful intro. And welcome, everybody, and thanks for tuning in tonight. So just quickly to set our goals and objectives for tonight. We can move to the next slide, please. Yeah. So our objectives for the Peds Match 22 webinar series is to provide pediatric residency applicants with one, foundational knowledge surrounding this year's match interview season, providing a well-rounded insight into the benefits of the program for each region, and then allowing for devoted time for personal and live Q&A. And then our goals for tonight's DO session, which is very special, is to provide tools towards empowering DO students as strong applicants for this year's match cycle, providing advice to find mentorship and sponsors to help navigate this tricky virtual season, as well as provide recommendations on how to avoid major pitfalls. So the engagement for tonight, we will be joined both by everybody here on Zoom with questions coming from the chat from there, as well as tweets using the hashtag FPR webinar. So feel free, if you're active on Twitter, to use that to ask any questions and kind of highlight everything that's been going on. And if you have friends that aren't already joined, go ahead and let them know so we can see your tweets. So we are very, very fortunate tonight to have representatives from both the COMCEP and the APPD. First off, I will introduce Dr. Joseph Gigante. He is the immediate past president of COMCEP, and he serves as the Director of Education at the Vanderbilt Academy of Excellence in Education, as well as the Director of Education for the Vanderbilt Office of Faculty Development. He is Professor of Pediatrics at Vanderbilt University Children's Hospital and practices clinically in academic general pediatrics. We also have Dr. Becky Blankenberg, who serves as president of the Association of Pediatric Program Directors, or APPD, as well as the Associate Chair of Education in the Department of Pediatrics at Stanford University. In her clinical practice, she sees patients as a pediatric hospitalist at Lucile Packard Children's Hospital. So we'd like to welcome both of them tonight. Unfortunately, Dr. Bhutani couldn't make it, but we'd like to open the floor to them for any sage words of advice.
I will go ahead and go first. First of all, Erica, thank you for hosting. And I didn't realize you were a Marvel geek. I think one of the questions you should have asked is, who's your favorite Marvel superhero? I'm a Spider-Man guy, just to go on record. So for those of you who are not familiar with COMCEP, we are an international community of educators who are passionate about advancing the art and science of medical student and osteopathic student education in pediatrics. And you kind of see our vision is better health for all patients through pediatric education. So we just want to kind of welcome you all. Also thank Tyler and Adobe for putting these webinars together. And I also encourage all of you to, attend the regional webinars that these joint APPD, Future Peds Reds, COMCEP webinars, they're going to be put forth. The other thing I would say is if you can, if there are pediatric educators at your home institutions, they are oftentimes a wealth of knowledge with regard to many of the residency programs. So tap into them. The other thing I was actually thinking about today is think about the osteopathic interns who are now the osteopathic students a year ago who are now interns in many of the programs around the country. Especially for those graduates of your program, reach out to them and ask them how last year went. I think, as a result of these programs, I think hopefully it allayed some of the fears and eased some of the anxiety and kind of helped give vital information with regard to the whole process, the whole interview process and the whole application process. And I know questions about away rotations and doing virtual interviews, and that your colleagues, your graduates went through it all last year, so they've got that under their belt. So take advantage of their experience. In addition to all the stuff we're going to offer to you and websites and social media, tap into them as well and reach out to them, even if you don't know them. I think if they're a graduate from your program, I think they'd be more than happy to talk to you. So best of luck in the upcoming cycle, and I will stop because I can talk forever and hand it over to Becky.
Thanks, Joe. I just want to say a very special thank you to Adobe and to Tyler for leading Future Peds Res, and thank you to Erica for putting together this whole session tonight. You've done an incredible job. I'm the president of APPD, which is the Pediatric Program Directors Association, and we have 220 residency programs nationally and 800 fellowships, and all of those educators who are here to help support you in this transition into residency. You play such an important role in our pediatric workforce as osteopathic physicians, and as students, we really value you and value the perspectives that you bring to our residency programs and the experiences that you bring, and really want to welcome you. There is not a more important time to be joining pediatrics. We think it's the best field in the world, and it's such an important time in our children's and our families' and communities' history to be a pediatrician and be able to advocate on behalf of kids and care for children. So we really look forward to welcoming you and to supporting you in this process.
Thank you so much. It's been great having both of you. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce tonight's panelists for tonight. I'll start with Dr. Chris Rooney. She is the Vice Chair of Education and the Pediatric Residency Program Director at Lehigh Valley Riley Children's Hospital in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Clinically, she practices pediatric hospital medicine. Dr. Tyree Winters is the Pediatric Residency Program Director at Atlantic Health Koryeb Children's Hospital. In his clinical practice, he sees children in general pediatrics and community health. Dr. Joanna Lewis is the Pediatric Residency Program Director at Advocate Children's Hospital in Park Ridge, Illinois. And in her clinical practice, she sees children in general pediatrics as well as community health. And last but not least, we have Dr. Laura Bode. She is the Clinical Associate Professor of Pediatrics at Oklahoma State University Center for Health Science and Program Director of the Osteopathic Medical Education Consortium of the Oklahoma Pediatrics Residency. So we'd like to welcome all of our panelists tonight, and thank you again for being here. So let's move on to our question and answer portion. So first off, how do we identify programs that are DO friendly? I think I am going to ask Dr. Bode what she thinks.
Well, I think that you guys will be doing a lot of researching of programs in general over the next month or so, and probably have already started. And because everything is a lot of virtual, our programs have been having contributions to their websites. And so I think that one thing to do is just review a list of the faculty and reviewing the residents, the current residents or the graduates, and seeing if they have osteopathic faculty and osteopathic residents in that program. And they're familiar with osteopathic background and our practices and principles.
Awesome, thank you. Do any of the other panelists want to add to that?
I'll say something. Oh, Tyree, do you want to go first?
No, Joanna, go for it.
Okay. I think that I would say that looking at programs and seeing who has other osteopathic residents is helpful. I would say that right now, all over the country, there has been a great movement to recognize the quality of osteopathic physicians as members of the pediatric residency community. So I would not discourage you that if there's a program that has a small number of DO residents, or even none, if it's a program you think would be a good fit for you, not to be swayed by what you see on their website, because we are all really doing a very thoughtful and intentional job of reviewing all the applicants that come across our desks, I think now more than ever before. So thinking about all the aspects of the program and not to be swayed by a program that maybe only has one DO or doesn't have any. I think the other thing is, as many programs around the country bring more DOs onto their residency, they will therefore over time have more DOs on their faculty. So looking to see sort of what that progression is, do you get a feeling that DOs are residents that are therefore retained as faculty also says something about a program.
Both of you made valid points, and if it's okay, Eric, if I answer this one as well. One of the things that I would say is being in both positions now, where I was a osteopathic student that was applying for residency and did my residency in an allopathic residency, which was also at the time before we jointly combined, was a duly accredited. So both on the ACGME and the AOA side, one of the things I looked for when I was applying was to see if there was any information that was listed about COMLEX scores as well. Because if it only listed USMLE scoring, that kind of gave me a little bit of telling, because I was one of those people that I only took the COMLEX and I was only going to take the COMLEX because I just didn't have the money to take both exams. The other thing that I would stress to you as well is something that's even at my program, at the program I did at Nationwide Children's. So again, who has programs for OMM? So we actually do have OMM curriculum that we have established. And that's one of the things that I would definitely say can help you to see not only are we interested in osteopathic physicians, but also in your practice, and not to assimilate into someone, but to integrate into the program. And that was a huge thing for me.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to send a quick reminder to everybody else attending. If you have any additional questions or anything that comes up, please feel free to add that to the chat in the sidebar, or tweet with the hashtag FPR webinar, and we'll create a list to add to the ending. So moving on to question 2, how many programs should DOs apply to this cycle? What factors should an applicant consider when creating their ERAS list? I think I'll ask Dr. Rooney.
Thank you. Yeah, that's kind of timely, because I think the second part of the question I actually put a little bit in the chat already about. But yes, I'd love to tackle this one. So, you know, I think I have maybe a little bit of a unique advantage in that I was really fortunate to be able to be a part of the APPD work group, the recruitment committee that has helped to sort of come up with ideas and recommendations that go into the national recommendation letter that comes out, you know, jointly APPD, COMCEP, AMSPEDEC, future peds and now next gen peds. I always, when I talk about the letter, I feel like I need 5 minutes to list all of the parties that are involved in creating it. It's such an awesome collaborative effort. But we did talk about this a lot. And I think in the letter, if anyone's had a chance to look at it, it talks about recommended numbers of programs, but admittedly, there's a bit more hard data out there talking about strict USMLE scores and what that can do to help guide you. So please jump in if I'm saying anything wrong, Becky or John, but I'm pretty sure the letter says about 16 programs for MD applicants that have gotten at least a 220 on their USMLE score. So that's not inherently helpful to our osteopathic colleagues who are saying, well, what does that mean for me? What does that mean in translation for my COMLEX scores? And, is there some different nuance to the fact that I'm an osteopathic trainee? So I think what I would say is, Joanna's 100% right in that this is a wonderful trend towards most programs really viewing every applicant holistically and not really seeing a difference between DO and MD as much as maybe historically you may have heard that could have existed. But I think it's important to recognize that there are still programs that may not be historically as familiar with osteopathic applicants, COMLEX scores, etc. So I think you may still need to consider a few more programs than an allopathic colleague, taking into account the shifting familiarity and comfort level of programs. And I also have, and I'll put it here in the chat, hopefully everybody can see the chat. And I will tell you, I am in no way, in any way affiliated, or do I, have any, recommendation particularly about utilizing this website, but it actually gives some really nice information for you guys. It basically lists sort of like this nice chart of, based on kind of overall percentiles, what does a score of an USMLE of 220 equate to in COMLEX? It actually ends up being somewhere between like 475 and 500. So if we're saying about 16 programs for a step of 220, then maybe about 16 to 18 programs for a COMLEX of 500 may be a reasonable thing to think about. That is not written in stone. That is not based on any, hardcore published data, but it does utilize sort of what's out there in terms of like comparison of scores when you're looking at USMLE versus COMLEX. Obviously, if you have any, and this is true for any applicant, not just osteopathic applicants, if you have any red flags on your application, then certainly you need to open that number up to a bit more programs. So, my advice would be maybe somewhere in the 18 to 20 range if you have pretty competitive COMLEX scores, and then any additional red flags, you may need to increase that number a bit more. I'd love to hear what my fellow panelists have to say about that recommendation, see if it's kind of in line what you guys were thinking. And then really quickly, I did put it in the chat, but the factors an applicant should consider when creating their ARIS list. I mean, for me, I always just tell people, like, you have to be happy for 3 years because there will be stressful times, there will be lack of sleep, there will be, so you really, really do need to make sure that outside of the hospital environment, you are in a place that you can find your happy space. So, location is key. Knowing yourself and knowing how far away or close you want to be to your support system is super important. Gaining an understanding of sort of the type of environment that you can thrive and succeed in. And that may mean, is that a smaller program? Is that a mid-size? Is that a larger program? Do you tend to get lost if you're in a huge amount of people, or do you really like to be around, 20, 30 other classmates? That's something to think about. So I'll stop there and maybe ask somebody else to see if they agree with me.
I think part of it is thinking about, in reality, how many interviews you're really going to do, and thinking some about like percent yield. Okay. So when we're talking about, let's say we pick 18 as the number from what Chris said. So but you have to be applying to like 18 of the right programs for that to be helpful to you. And you have to be guided by all of those factors that Chris said. And maybe you're doing the couples match, or maybe where your partner needs to live has different types of programs, or maybe where you have to care for a family member, whether they're older or younger family member, or your children, or anything. So there's lots of different factors. So I believe, like on Frida and in all other places, you can see, for example, like of the number of applications a program gets, what percentage of those people they interview and what percentage of those people are in their class. So the numbers are, but if you're applying, I know a lot of schools are telling you to apply to 40 programs, 50 programs. If you think you're going to get even a 50% yield, there's no way you're doing 23 or 24 interviews. I mean, it's just, you're not going to have the time. You're not going to be as focused. So it's sort of thinking about those two concepts together as what you think your yield is going to be. I'll tell you, I know we're going to talk about board scores later. I look at USMLE as pass fail. That's how I look at it, is as pass fail. And if you failed, I just sort of look at what happened when you pass the next time. I mean, I think that all of us are looking at things in a really different way. So to me, like a 490 versus a 510 versus a 550 on your step one is not making a huge difference. So I think that part of that too is where, just like Chris is saying, it's really, this is about you. This is the one time in your life, different from medical school, that you are choosing us as much as we are choosing you. We are all looking for best fit. And if you're going to be happier in Chris's program than my program, or Tyree's program, or Laura's program, I want you to go there, because we all want you to be where you're going to be happy. Because at the end of the day, we are all trying together to like make the world a better place by helping kids and their families, right? And so if everyone can find the perfect place for them, then that's better for all of us in the end.
I was going to say, I completely agree with Joanna. I think she hit the nail on the head with that when she said you have to figure out what best places for you. The other thing I was going to say too, to Chris and Joanna's point, is I would definitely look at or think about location in regards to how I'm applying as well. Because there are some locations that are just going to be more familiar with DOs or with osteopathic
Dr. Winters, sorry, you're freezing a little bit.
Is the way that I know that there's a lot of questions in the chat that my level 2.
Sorry, no. A lot of that was cutting in and out.
Okay.
Maybe we'll address it in some of the upcoming questions too.
So while Ty's working on that, if you don't mind, I just wanted to very quickly, because Dr. Frona made a good point. I sort of casually use the word red flags, but there may be a lot of people that are sort of like, what do you mean by that? So I think every program may have their own definition of red flags, but certainly I think most would agree, if you're talking about having needed to remediate, a course, or, had, academic probation, situations, or multiple step failures, those are pretty standard, going to be called red flags across, the board. And in those cases, absolutely, I would recommend definitely increasing your number of programs that you're applying to, because just like Joanna said, you just have to really kind of think about what is the likelihood of like my percentage yield of interviews compared to programs applied to. So certainly and I'll throw out there, I'll put my email in the chat. I have no problem if people want to reach out and ask further questions, down the road, because we do have a limited amount of time at this webinar, but hopefully that helps a little bit.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. So kind of along the same boat, our third question is, how are COMLEX scores viewed in comparison to STEP scores since the merger? Which exams, STEP or level 1 versus 2, is more important? Did anyone specifically want to chime in on that? It's like, I know some of it was already answered, but.
Well, Laura, you mostly look at COMLEX scores, right? You were saying?
That's right.
Yeah, I can say that there is, Chris put in the chat, you know, there was for a while, like there's interesting literature about step 1 and level 1 correlating with American Board of Pediatrics pass rate. There's also a really great body of literature in the last few years about step 2 and level 2 correlating like with milestones and clinical performance. So I think everybody's looking at things in different ways. When I think about the tests, so I look at COMLEX and STEP equally when I'm looking at level 2. Like I said, level 1 and step 1, we just are mostly looking at as pass fail. But the reality is that we always have to keep taking tests. And so if we put no importance on a test at all, that would be challenging, because we do, when you finish your, you know, we need you to pass step 3 or level 3 when you're a resident with us, and we need you to pass your boards when you finish. So we want to have some sort of gauge on test taking ability over time. And this is one sort of equalizer of sorts. But I do think, I'll tell you the truth is, when I was a new program director as an MD, I didn't understand COMLEX at the beginning. And so it took me some time to I was trying to do all these comparisons between STEP and COMLEX, you know, USMLE and COMLEX, I think is the best way to say them, right? So those are the comparable test level or step. But I was trying to really understand them both, and it took me some time to really get a grasp of where things were. But I just think that for your colleagues that are in fields that are not pediatrics, this might be a more significant hurdle for them to overcome than for those of you that are in pediatrics, which I think is a positive.
Thank you. And then our fourth question. So many osteopathic institutions had to implement virtual rotations due to a lack of rotation sites during the pandemic. How will this be viewed in comparison to MD applicants with larger home affiliations? I think I'll ask Dr. Winters about that.
Can you hear me now okay? Okay, I'm sorry. When I try to use the virtual background, my home internet, if my husband is on a computer too, is like, yeah, it's not going to happen. Sorry, everyone. But just to answer that question, I think this is a very, very valid question, because not only am I a program director, but I also teach for both Rowan University, but I also teach for Thomas Jefferson as well as St. George's University. And so a lot of our IMG students are going through the same process in terms of not having home institutions where they're able to, or home affiliates where they're able to do some of their work, even compared to some of our osteopathic students who still do have home institutions where they can go to. I think the most important thing to remember is you are not in a vacuum when it comes to the pandemic. And that's one of the things I've been really trying to impress upon not only the students that I work with, but mentees that I have, which is, I know that last year there was so much in terms of just like stress and anxiety, not only for you guys, but also for the program directors. Let me tell you, we were stressing out, pulling our hair out, like, oh my God, how do we make this a best fit? With that being said, you're not in a vacuum. We understand that you're not going to be able to have sometimes availability to be able to go in and do rotations. So we really do take that into consideration, and we really look at our candidates with a holistic view. We really do take consideration to thinking about, not only did you have to do these rotations as a medical student, some of our residents had to do virtual rotations actually. So with that being said, just know this is not something where we're holding it against you. In most programs, I think I'm safe to say, and you have the president of the APPD that's sitting right here shaking her head, like, yeah, we're not the only program that understands this, just so you know.
I would agree. And I would even jump in and say, you know, I think as much as you guys as applicants worry, program directors are worrying like 1,000 times more because we have this like very parental nature about us, and we really want what's best for all of you, like from day one. And so, I mean, just as an example, like at our program, and I know a lot of my colleagues, you know, that I am fortunate enough to kind of talk with across the country, you know, we like fully anticipated that people would not have access to the same types of experiences as they have in the past. And we were more worried about how are we as a program going to build them up and get them up to speed and do a nice intern boot camp that's going to make them feel confident and, you know, provide them with enough resources to really kind of let them hit the ground running. So I guess I would just really want you to have, you know, a significant degree of reassurance that it's yet another reason why you've picked the right specialty, right? Like peds is just, it's a nurturing being, and so we get it, and you know, we're going to try to help support you as much as possible. Now, I will add, I do really like when I'm talking to an applicant to hear about the efforts they made to see what types of rotations they could do, etc. I think if someone's just sort of like, yeah, you know, it was kind of hard during COVID, and so I just did everything virtual, that does sound a little bit different than, you know, I really did my homework. I reached out to 7 different institutions. Unfortunately, I was unable to do this. I tried to get an inpatient and an ambulatory, and, you know, so I think there is something to be said about showing that you've tried, that you understand the importance, that, you know, you did your homework, but in the end, if it doesn't work out, it's not on you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's wonderful advice. Thanks.
I was just going to echo everybody. I think especially pediatric program directors, we've for years looked at applications holistically, and it's not just one piece of the puzzle. And even specifically for osteopathic schools, a lot of them are new or building their programs. And so some students have come even without a pandemic and factoring in without as rich clinical pediatric experience as other students. But we really want to take on your pediatric education when you're here in the program. And so we're going to nurture wherever you come in from and get you to where you need to be at the end. So
I think none of us think that you didn't do away rotations because you didn't want to, right? Like, I think the way we function is assuming that everyone is working with good intent. This is like how we practice with our patients. This is how we work with each other. So if you don't have away rotations, we usually assume it's because you weren't able to do them as much as you wanted to. But I think when I'm talking to an applicant, what I want to see is that you understand that, and that you have sort of thought about what that means for you in your transition to residency. So someone that hasn't done inpatient pediatrics or outpatient pediatrics, I might ask you, like, where you think you've been able to build those skills in your other rotations. And if you tell me that when you did a medicine sub-I, you understand that that means calling consultants and managing multiple patients and presenting in a room. Or if you say, I couldn't do a peds rotation, but when I was on my family medicine rotation, I really tried to look out to see the kids, or I couldn't see kids, but I looked through the eyes of a parent to see how they interact with their child, sort of understanding that throughout the course of your training, you used a pediatric lens to work with what you were doing, and that you have a sense of what it might mean going forward, tells me about like your reflection and your commitment. And that's something, like Laura said, we don't expect you to be able to do this stuff till you get here. That's why we're training you. It's just like we say in residency, if you're going to go on to be a pediatric cardiologist, I want you to do that in your fellowship. When you're in your residency, I want you to learn all the basics of general peds. It's the same concept that what you're looking for when you come in.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. And then our last question, I will ask each one of you, what is the best advice you have for an osteopathic applicant specifically for this cycle? So I guess I'll just go in alphabetical order. So Dr. Bode.
Sure. I just want to say everything will work out the way it's supposed to. I am a big believer of that. I want you to enjoy this time of your life. It's going to be weird doing virtual interviews again, but it'll still be interesting, and I want you to enjoy it. And really have confidence in yourself as an applicant, and be proud of your osteopathic training. You are a special applicant with that training. You have mentors that have taught you how to practice holistic medicine, which is so important in pediatrics. And so be proud of that training and embrace it.
Awesome. And then Dr. Lewis.
Yeah, I mean, have fun, enjoy. You get to talk to really cool people that are doing amazing things. I mean, there's 220 pediatric programs that are all doing wonderful things. We are a group of people that are constantly lifting each other up and sharing best practices and learning from each other. So that's really great for you. I think in the past, what I've had a lot of osteopathic applicants come to me and say like, well, since I'm only a DO applicant, is that going to be okay? It's the same as me coming to you and saying, well, since I'm just a general pediatrician, like, does this mean I'm an equal doctor? And I think you should not have that attitude. I agree with what Laura said. You are well-trained, qualified applications that are ready to dedicate, applicants that are ready to dedicate your lives to kids. I think, but really the most important thing is to take this application cycle as a time for introspection and prioritization. Really taking it as an opportunity to ask the questions you want to know the answers to, not the questions you think that we want you to ask us. So I always tell people, don't say to me, what are the strengths of your program? Because if I go on about, I don't know, something about our community health curriculum and what really matters to you is global health, then I'd rather you just ask me about global health. So think about the things that are important to you, because this is your choice. This is in your favor. So really taking the time to be thoughtful.
Wonderful, thank you. Dr. Rooney?
Yeah, these are all wonderful, wonderful pieces of advice. Maybe I'll take this opportunity just because I do think it's kind of an elephant in the room question that maybe we didn't have an opportunity to fully tackle. I tried to do the best I could in the chat, but it's that question of like, oh my word, it's all virtual. How am I ever gonna know the like true feel of a program and know it's the fit for me? And so I guess what I would say is, first of all, deep breath and recognize, like, on the program side, we've actually been through this a whole year now, which is crazy to say. So we do have a little bit of it under our belt. And I think we've learned amazing lessons in the last year in terms of like doing the best we can to get you that kind of information and a feel. It's still by far the thing that I think we all equally sort of have angst about in the virtual season, because of course we want you to come and meet all of our family and see where we live and our home, you know, of course. But honestly, and I never thought I would say this because as a mom of 2 tween and teen boys, I'm discouraging social media as much as possible. But for you guys, I would actually encourage it, because I think programs are doing such a great job of, you know, sort of showcasing exactly what we're talking about. That sort of like day-to-day vibe of the program. Like, what are they doing? You know, are they goofy? Are they, you know, this? Are they that? What types of residents seem to be there? And of course, like we all know, you know, you can't 100% know from social media, but we're all pretty genuine people out there. So at least it gives you some type of a sense. So, you know, if you just do a, you know, a quick search through Instagram, you're going to find almost every single program at this point, I think. I'm not saying follow every single program, you don't have to do that, but if there's ones that you have a potential interest in that can help. And then the other thing is, even though we're sort of, you know, discouraging second looks, in-person interviews, etc., for the wonderful purposes of equity and cost savings and carbon footprints, it does not mean that if you've got it down to like 2 or 3 programs and you really sort of need to know how you feel when you drive around Chicago versus, you know, Pittsburgh versus Houston, no one's telling you you can't visit the city. You just can't come in that old school formal capacity and, you know, go round with the team and, you know, meet everybody again twice and have 6 different lunches with them. But you can still get a vibe for the feel of the place. And so I'm unofficially telling you that, you know, might be something you can consider without it actually being a second look.
Awesome, thank you. And then Dr. Winters.
So I have 2 pieces of advice. The first piece is, and it kind of goes along with what everybody said, which is, if you ever follow me on Twitter, TMSWDO, I am a huge, huge proud DO. I'm actually on the National Osteopathic Campaign. I am so DO, it hurts inside. I'm like AT still proud, and you will never catch me not representing a DO or being DO proud. So don't ever go into a place or into a program hiding who you are. That's just like me trying to hide that I'm Black. It's just not going to happen. You are going to know it when I walk into the room, because I love my melanin. I love everything about me, and I love everything about being an osteopathic. So physicians, so please don't hide yourself. That's the first piece of advice. The second piece of advice is shoot your shot. If you really think, like, it was even a question in the chat about, well, there was a minimum on the score, so I'm not sure, go for it. Like, seriously, try. You'll be surprised. I shot, and I promise you, I was like, it was the only place that I could go that would satisfy my scholarship contract, and I got it. So I'm just telling you, you'll be surprised. Shoot your shot. That's all.
Can I say one thing about the score thing real quick? So I learned something this year when our program last month was filling out. So we have to fill out this survey that uploads to Frida or whatever, okay? They will not let you not put a minimum score in. We tried. So it says, like, what's your minimum USMLE cutoff and what is your minimum COMLEX cutoff? And I wanted to put nothing in, and the system won't let you put nothing in. So everybody that has something in, it's because we have to. So you sort of pick a number that seems like it's, I don't know, I don't think most people pick just the passing score as what they have. But so I think that those are not always hard to pass. If somebody puts something on their website, their actual website, that's a little different, but still I would reach out. But I think that things that you see on Frida or on those lists, I was very surprised that we had to put a number.
That's really valuable information. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So that concludes the preset questions. And now we have a list of all of the questions that came in via Twitter and in the Zoom chat. So one of them is, how do you do well on an audition rotation and show interest in a program? Anyone want to take that one up?
I'll go again. So I would just say, truly, truly be yourself. I mean, obviously, I think all of the things that I would say probably don't need to be said in the sense of, you know, be punctual, be professional, you know, work hard, etc. One little piece of advice that I wish I could tell people before they start is just be a little bit aware of not stepping too far over the residents' toes in an effort to want to do really, really well. And I'm not really sure how else to put that, but I think you know what I'm saying, right? We've all been around that student that is like the full on quote unquote gunner or what have you. And if you're constantly like interrupting the intern when they're trying to present, or like jumping over the senior resident when they're trying to answer a question, trust me when I tell you, residents do have some degree of input down the road, you know, when it comes to sort of, you know, rank lists and those sorts of things. So you want to be sure that you also present yourself as someone that they could see themselves being a colleague with and working with in the future. I don't anticipate that's, you know, ever something that would be a conscious thing that people are doing, but sometimes in that effort to be your best self and just impress the heck out of the program you want to be at, it can happen accidentally. So just, you know, I think a nice balance. You don't want to be, you know, a wallflower and never say a word, but just be cognizant that that can sometimes happen. I think, you know, I wish I could have told some people that earlier before.
I think what's funny is what it's called actually, and that it psychs you out in the wrong way. So this term audition rotation, I actually never heard until I was a program director. So when I was a medical student, we just called them away rotations or visiting rotations. And that's purely what they were. And I think if you think of it like that, like I'm not expecting you to audition for me every day that you're here for the 4 weeks that you're here. I think if you think of it as an away rotation and you give it your all, like just like you would give it any rotation, that's exactly what Chris is talking about, like that you are doing all those things that you would do anyway. The reality is that you have to remember when you're somewhere else and people don't know you, is that you're never not being observed, right? So just like thinking, I think it's like how people think that we used to have applicant dinners the night before or the night of, and they thought like that you were sort of off the clock for those dinners, but anything you say to residents is always going to be remembered. So, but I do think thinking of it, I know I'm saying sort of contradictory things, but thinking of it as an away rotation, you are trying, the reason you're coming to me is not just to audition for me. I hope the reason you're coming to my program is because you want to learn from us, right? If you sign up to do Peds ID, it's because you really want to learn about pediatrics, infectious disease, and also while you're there, you want to see how our program works. But if you come across it as an opportunity for your learning in a different environment than where you were before, then I think you're going to be successful.
Wonderful, thank you. And then our next question is, does geography matter? Are programs more likely to take you if you went to school or are from a specific area surrounding that program? Dr. Winters or Dr. Vode want to say anything about that?
I think it probably depends on the program and what the goals and the missions of that program are. For instance, our program's kind of goal is to have pediatricians who want to stay in help healthcare in Oklahoma, or not necessarily Oklahoma, but community pediatricians or work for patients who are in the rural or underserved areas. And so we will look for people who are close by and who would be interested in staying close by and practicing nearby, but also love to have applicants from all over, and then applicants do come from all over and then go back and kind of spread our Oklahoma joy. But I think it does probably depend on the program.
I was going to say, actually, even, can you hear me again? Am I breaking up? Okay, thank you. I was just going to say, the one thing is that if a program ever was to ask you, like, why are you coming here specifically, or do you have any ties to the community, or blah, 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 blah. Those are all things that we shouldn't be asking. So please make sure you don't ask those questions. But I would definitely say that it does help us to be able to see, like, oh, there is some connection. But I don't think it's something that we specifically look out for when we are getting ready to offer interviews. When you are there, there's been many times where we have someone who is far, and they just saw our program, they really loved what our program was about, and we were excited for them, and it was a match, pun intended. But with that being said, it's something that you definitely can see is, it can be helpful, but it's not the most important thing. Just remember that. And just to answer one other thing from the last question, I would definitely say intellectual curiosity is what I want to see when you're doing a rotation with us. I don't care how much you know about peds. If I expected you to know everything about peds, why are you doing even a residency right now? You wouldn't be. But what I do care about is that you're really trying to learn and understand and remember that this is your patient. This is not my patient that ensuring, like, why are things happening? Oh my God, that's just the ultimate for me. I'm like, I want that person in my program because I know that you're going to try your best.
Fantastic, thank you. And then our third and final question is, how does the reputation of our school matter, especially if we are at a brand new or a younger school? Dr. Lewis, maybe?
Those of you that know me know that I am honest. I think it's challenging. I think that's just the truth, that if we don't know much about your school, then that means we actually don't know much about your school, right? So, like, how can we know the quality of the graduates of your program if there have never been graduates from your program, or if there have already been only been one or two classes of graduates from your program? So you do sort of have to sell yourself in a little bit of a different way. I think especially if you're looking for a farther geographic reach. So, or somewhere that you haven't been before, but I find it really interesting to talk to people from new schools and find out why they made that choice and what they've learned from being a part of a new school, how they've invested in how the school has grown. And because I think almost all the time I find that to be very interesting. And then over time, you've done everyone at your school a favor, because I now am going to look at that school again and say, even if you didn't end up matching with my program, oh, I talked to a bunch of people from this school. Now I have a sense of what they know. But I do think, like Chris was saying, it's not on the red flag list because there's not something wrong with what you did. But this is the same. There are new allopathic schools too. And it's not about being a DO or MD. It's if there have not been many graduates from your program, we simply can't know sort of what the product is that's being put out of the school. And therefore you just might need to extend your reach, have a wider reach, and be really able to tell the story, because most people find it to be a very meaningful process to go through being at a new school.
I would absolutely support everything that Joanna said. I do think you have to be realistic, and you may need to kind of broaden the number of applications than if you were at a very, well-established, well-known program. However, I'll give a little more specific example, I think, of what she may have been referencing in terms of like tell the story. So I have a unique perspective because I started our pediatric residency program here. So I get it. I get what it's like to have to try to like be the new program and, have residents match into fellowships from a new program, like 100% understand. The biggest thing I think you bring to the table is that in many situations, now obviously don't lie about it if it's not the case, but in many situations, you have this like very trailblazer mentality. You give amazing sort of, feedback and contribute to building, a curriculum or a program or, and those are not things that a lot of people can say. So if you do have that type of experience under your belt from being at a newer school, those are the kinds of things you're going to want to highlight, right? Because that absolutely means a lot to me to say, okay, this person, had great emotional intelligence, and they have great leadership and team playing, like all those intangibles that you can manifest and give examples of can definitely help, sort of counter the fact that it's a newer program.
Go ahead, Dr.
I was going to say, I also think this is time now where having letters of recommendation from individuals will really help you, especially if you're able to do not only away rotations, but say, for instance, when you're in a new school, it doesn't mean that all of your faculty are new as well either, right? So you definitely will have faculty that will come from other locations and places, and this is a great time to utilize your resources. I'm big on utilizing resources, which is looking to see where other faculty members, especially in your department of pediatrics, went. Say, hey, where did you go for your program? Where did you go for your training? And then connecting with them, that would definitely help. Because if I see a letter from someone who I trained with or who I know, I don't even question. I'm just like, okay, I'll take your word for it. You know what I mean?
Wonderful. Thanks so much. That concludes tonight's session. So sorry that we weren't able to address all the questions in the chat and on Twitter. I wish we could spend the next 4 hours talking about all of this, but thank you again to all the panelists for being here tonight. All of that advice was super valuable and helpful. So on behalf of Future Peds Res, thank you all.
And I'll just include, and thank you, Erica, for helping us put all this on. So thank you again to all our panelists. And then just a quick shameless plug from us at Future Peds Res. In mid-September, we'll be sending out a survey about our whole series, and we would love it if you would please fill it out, all of the attendees. It'll really help us know how we, as a group of many organizations, can continue to support people years down the road, and give us an idea of what went well this year and what can go better. So thank you all so much for joining us, and have a wonderful, wonderful evening.
Before we head out, I just want to make a quick mention as we keep going into application season. Of course, be sure to keep tuning in. We have our regional webinars loading up, and they are going to be great. And you can also register for these by visiting our homepage, futurepedsres.com, and clicking on the webinar series registration here link, and that'll take you directly to registration. Only need to register once, and you can select the different webinars you want to attend. And of course, stay tuned. Twitter, Instagram, and also sign up for our listserv to stay tuned to everything Future Peds Res and Peds Match 22. Thank y'all. Have a good night.